Welcome to another episode of Soap Thing Thoughts. Joining me today is Mantic59. Welcome to the Soap Thing Project. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing today?
Oh, swell. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning over here,
Oh,
but I've been kind of chewing through some new video game releases that have been coming out lately. It's kind of my hobby whenever I'm not wet shaving lately with out here in Turkey with nothing much else to do. So that's been keeping me busy. So tell me, what exactly do you do? I know you do the Shaveologist website. Is that like your day job, or do you have something else that you kind of do behind the scenes?
for years, I was involved with telecommunications, uh, something totally unrelated to shaving. Uh, but when I became interested in shaving and started the Sharpologist website and the videos on YouTube and things like that, I actually started making some revenue off it, and with things like ads and things like that. And after a few years of that, I discovered that I could replace my boring desk job with something that was kind of interesting and a little off the wall, and that was traditional shaving. And so I took early retirement in 2015, and I am now a full-time wet shaving, for lack of a better word, advocate. Of course, I've done videos. I've got the Sharpologist website. Um, I've even gone around the United States to high-end spa barbershops doing presentations for their customers on traditional shaving. That has dramatically slowed down because of COVID, but it's just starting to come back up again. I'm getting a little more interest from the high-end barbers around the country. So hopefully sometime soon I'll be able to do some of that again as well.
That's surprising. I didn't know you were doing that. Hopefully, that's something that you get to get back into in full swing because that's awesome that you're able to actually reach out to people and be in the same room and kind of show them the benefits of how this can really elevate the quality of their shave.
Yeah, me
Um,
too. I mean, it's interesting to see how enthusiastic some of these people become when they are shown that shaving does not have to be a annoying, painful chore, but can actually be a very pleasant pastime, almost a hobby. And their reactions are kind of what keep me going doing things like that. Yeah.
So Sharpologist, I think initially I accidentally called it Shaveologist. My apologies, but for those who don't know, the Sharpologist website, what is it and what does it do?
It initially started years ago as just sort of uh, I called it a production blog for writing a little bit how I was doing my YouTube videos at the time. This was at the early 2000s. And a few years later, for lack of a better word, convert of mine that had converted over traditional wet shaving from my YouTube videos, also happened to be a owner of a digital media company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And he suggested that I do create a website kind of in tandem with doing the videos. So with his help, I created Sharpologist. We created Sharpologist. And that's kind of where it grew from there. It started something just as a sort of a sideline, and then kind of took over. And that's actually now my main source of time and energy. And unfortunately, I haven't done videos in a while, but hopefully I'll be able to start those up sometime soon too. But it originally started with me and one other guy, and he has since parted ways with me very amicably. We still keep in touch with each other, but I run the website myself now.
Oh, good on you. Hopefully you can come back to doing videos here sometime soon. I'm sure everybody in this community will be glad to have you. So I there's been a thought that's been eating at me for a while, and I think I know the answer to it, but I want to get your thoughts on it. So for most of the 20th century, Gillette basically had the wet shaving market by the balls. Like they at one point, I think had like 80 something percent of the double edged blade market for like I said, for most of the 20th century. And, you know, you had Schick, which was a distant second place. But then something happened in the late 90s or the early 2000s. I have to ask if you know the answer to this. What did companies like Gillette and Schick, what did they do to come off the rails so badly that they single-handedly pushed so many people into traditional shaving and by extension create this huge hobbyist market that we now have?
Sure. Well, to be fair to Gillette, they still own a huge majority of the market. Yes, it's gone down some, but let's face facts that they still are the proverbial 800-pound gorilla of shaving. I think they kind of stumbled along the way with the blade, what I call the blade wars, you know, going from 2 blades to 3 blades to 4 blades, 5 blades, 6 blades, things like that. And really when the fusion came out is when people just sort of threw up their hands and said, well, wait a minute here, this is getting ridiculous, and started looking for alternatives, or at least maybe going back to, say, from a 5-blade razor to a 3-blade razor, because the return on investment just wasn't there. They were asking outrageous prices for refill cartridges, which have since gone down a little bit, but still. And I think Gillette kind of lost the idea that shaving was more than just making money. There are some real two words that shouldn't go together, real intangible benefits to shaving, and I think they kind of lost track with that. Oops.
So let me unpack some of that, because I think I kind of saw that in hindsight too. Like for decades, you had the Track 2, which was a 2-bladed razor, and then you had the Atra, which was 2 blades, and then the Sensor that was 2 blades. And then you had the Mach 3, which I think people were already starting to feel like that was a little bit of a stretch. And then when the Fusion came out, which was 5 blades, I think that's when people unplugged. I think you're right on that. And you said that Gillette kind of lost touch with the idea that shaving was more than just a chore. Do you think that was a Procter and Gamble thing? Because it seems like in the 90s they were doing pretty okay, and then in the early to mid 2000s when Procter and Gamble bought them, it seems like that's when everything started to go sideways. Like it started to look more overtly like a cash grab.
Right. I feel that way myself. I don't have any specific firm facts or knowledge to confirm that, but it certainly seems that way. It all became very numbers oriented and bottom line oriented, versus at least paying some respect to other portions of the shaver's psyche, if you will.
Right. So at what point did you start looking around and thinking to yourself, I don't know what's going on here, but something is creeping up and it's got legs. Like there is a pushback or a rejection of this. When did you start seeing kind of murmurings of that going on?
Well, it's hard for me to detect the beginnings, because quite frankly, for 30 years, I used an electric razor. I did not shave manually at all. Um, I was dating a young lady who is now my wife uh, in the 90s, and she just adored the feeling of a freshly shaved face, but it just didn't last very long with an electric razor. And then after we got married for I think it was our second wedding anniversary, we took a trip to Las Vegas, and she took me to a barber and had them give me a barber shave with lather and a straight razor and things like that. And that was really life changing for me. It was just really massively a mind blown kind of thing with the smoothness and softness of my face. And of course, my wife was just completely thrilled out of her mind. And so that's kind of what got me started in the early 2000s. And at that time, really, the Mach 3 was kind of the only game in town in a lot of ways. Even there was Art of Shaving and a couple other artisans, and there was very, very little else as far as the traditional uh, shaving technology, if you will. It had all sort of died off in the early 90s, really maybe even the late 80s. I think, as you said, kind of the introduction of the Fusion was more of the tripping point where things got a little crazy with technology, and people started looking for something a little simpler, and then the market responded by taking a step back instead of a step forward. And a lot of people realized, I guess I should say, a lot of small businesses and artisans realized here is an opportunity to take back some of that money that had been siphoned away over the years by large corporations. And so you saw the start of companies like Art of Shaving in the US, and the resurgence of some of the traditional shaving companies like the three T's, Trumper, Truefoot Hill, and Taylor of Old Bond Street. Of course, Pereira out of Italy, and a few others. And then it started growing a little more organically from there. Now, again, I do want to mention that in the grand scheme of things, it's still a fairly small percentage of the overall market, but it is definitely there and has definitely expanded over the years. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we've even seen Gillette come back in the United States with a double-edged razor that you can buy in many brick and mortar outlets like drugstores and grocery stores and things like that. The King C Gillette double-edged razor, even though it's made in China, it's still under the Gillette name. So even they've kind of acknowledged the issue.
Right. I was just about to say that before you did. I think it finally got big enough that even Gillette couldn't ignore it, and they came out with the King C Gillette razor, and then the Gillette Heritage razor had a really good run. And then just recently, I realized that it's hard to find. You can't find it on Amazon anymore. For those of you who don't know, the Gillette Heritage was more of a Mula R89 style razor that came in an old fashioned Gillette style kind of brown fake leather looking kind of case that was the kind of their way of saying, we see what's going on. Now they did it in their typical corporate fashion, but they gave it the time of day, which I think was a step in the right direction. One of the things I think is interesting though is companies like I call them legacy products, like HL Thader, who sadly went out of business, but you had like Shave Mac for brushes, you had Perazzo and Taylor of Old Bond Street, and even to a degree Saponificio Veracino. Like there's a lot of these legacy brands that have existed for most of the 20th century, but they were really low visibility in the US until we started having this rejection of corporate shaving products, which sounds like started getting to be kind of a big deal in the mid 2000s for exactly the reason we've been talking about. So when you started seeing people doing YouTube videos, that's what it started out with. It started out as a lot of Taylor of Old Bond Street, a lot of Leah and Latoha and, you know, Bombay and things like that. That's what the hobby started out as. So let's talk about, at what point did it start to turn into, whoa, there's a lot of small businesses getting into this. It's not just these legacy brands that are smaller than Gillette but still pretty big. It's like now we got people making, you know, soaps and brushes and even to an extent razors, like out of their garage right here in the US. Like, when did that start to become obvious to you that like this might balloon into something bigger than I thought it would be?
Yeah, I think the growth curve probably started ramping up around 2011, 2012, in that area. I mean, it's not like they weren't before that. There was definitely the increase had started before then, probably maybe even 10 years before. But that's when I noticed it really taking off, was the early 2010s, where you got to see a significant increase in the number of artisans that were getting heavily involved and taking advantage of this new kind of I don't want to say cultural, well, maybe I should say cultural, this cultural thinking, at least in the United States, of going back to something a little different than what they had seen. So I think the past 10 years have created that curve going up like this, where beforehand it was maybe a more gentle curve, but still going up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, looking back, you could kind of see that, like, you know, these products were around, but you didn't start seeing them be highly visible on social media until the early 2010s when all of a sudden it exploded.
Right.
Now, as we move forward in this whole kind of story of how we got here, it seems like in recent years, especially in the last year or two, it almost seems like the traditional shaving industry kind of overplayed itself to the point where you've got a lot of people folding up and going away. Like, there's been just these shocking closures where it was artisans where you never thought they were going to go anywhere anytime soon, and all of a sudden they're just like, we're out. Like, sorry, you know, we're going out of business. A lot of people want to blame it on COVID, which, okay, I can see some of that, but the other part of me, and I've spoken about this in previous videos, it kind of looks like oversaturation is a lot
Yeah.
of it. So knowing now, like, what you've learned throughout the years, where do you see this going if you had to peg it somewhere?
Yeah. I agree with a lot with what you've said. I think we've reached, particularly with shaving soap artisans, I think we've reached a saturation point. I think COVID, with some of the supply chain issues, exacerbated that quite a bit, and just price increases in general, partly due to that same thing. I think, particularly with the soap artisans, we've reached a point of it just can't really take any more. So I think you'll continue to see a little bit of realignment on there. The well-established names, I think, are doing pretty well. The one or two person shops, where it's some fella and his wife, or some young lady and her husband kind of thing, they're going to have a lot harder time. I think there's still some room to grow with the razor artisans, though, but even they are approaching, I think, a point where it's going to be more and more difficult to make a distinguishing trend. Here's artisan X who has some kind of razor that is differentiated in some respect. Maybe it's it's got a pivot, like OneBlade or Broman or High Proof, or of course maybe Leaf with the half blades, and titanium razors for the high end, things like that, where they can distinguish their product a little more. I think there's still some growth there. I think there's definitely some growth still in shaving creams, as distinguished from shaving soaps. But I do also notice that even some established companies in the shaving cream realm, like particularly Trumper, you don't see much Trumper anymore. I mean, obviously they're still there, but I think they've kind of fallen out of favor. And I think there are still opportunities for other manufacturers to come into that realm on shave creams. And then there's the accessories that you'll always have to some respect. The shaving sets, with the shaving stands, different types of brushes, I think, are still an interesting way to go, particularly with the new versions of the latest generations of synthetic brushes. That's become quite robust and starting to overshadow the long-established Badger and Boar manufacturers. That'll be interesting to see in the future too.
Yeah, let's talk about a couple of those things. It does feel like some legacy soap makers are starting to kind of see the writing on the wall. Like Taylor of Old Bond Street, for example, in recent years has been, cranking out a new scent every once in a while to kind of keep things interesting. And then companies like, Shave Mac, which Shave Mac became a really interesting situation because when HL Thader went under, because we learned things about Shave Mac that up until then we can only speculate. Well, now there's no longer any doubt. Like, we know that Shave Mac was making HL Thader's handles. We know that Shave Mac has been making the Savile Row brushes. So, but Shave Mac started like doing business and collaborating with AP Shave Co., which has been kind of the king of synthetic knots in recent years. And so I think they're starting to see the writing on the wall. Tobbs is kind of seeing the writing on the wall, but companies like Trumper, like you said, they just don't even know what to do. Like they're just hoping that they can rest on their name, and that's going to work for a lot of them, but it's not going to work for all of them.
Yeah, I very much agree. Getting back to like Taylor and TrueFit, and my comments about shave creams versus shave soaps, with the well-established names like Taylor and Trumper and TrueFit, their shave soaps have in my opinion, gone down noticeably in quality over the past few years. They've reformulated it almost into oblivion. The exception is DR Harris, who seems to be still doing quite well with their triple milled hard shave soaps that still seem to be a decent quality, but they're being overshadowed by the soft soaps and croaps of the artisans. I do want to make note that, as you said, Taylor does occasionally come out with a new scent, and TrueFit just came out as of 3 days ago, I believe it is, with a new line called Mayfair, which includes shave creams. And I've got one of those on the way to give a try. Hopefully that bodes well for TrueFit and Hill.
I'm gonna have to look that up because I didn't know that was released. I caught the Taylor of Old Bond Street Oud scent pretty quickly, but DR Harris, I didn't know that. You said it was a Mayfair they were doing.
That was TrueFit.
TrueFit.
DR Harris has not. I was saying DR Harris appears to have not reformulated their shave soaps into oblivion, and TrueFit and Hill just came out with a new line called Mayfair. That includes a shave cream.
I'm gonna have to look into that to see what that's all about. Okay, so some of them are kind of hanging in there. They're big enough that they're probably going to do fine. it seems like the artisan space is where things are ebbing and flowing and going up and down. Let me ask you this. Let's kind of do a hard pivot into something a little more positive. What have you been enjoying lately, and what have you been using in recent months or recent years that you're quite proud of?
Oh my. Uh, it's really an embarrassment of riches as far as shave soaps go. I find myself trying Ariana and Evans, PAA. Of course, they're pretty well established. Uh, I just got some Elysium shave soap uh, the other day and tried it today and found it excellent. There's a couple other ones that I just got today that I have not even tried yet. Um, let's see who else. I keep if you read Sharpologist for any length of time, I keep pounding on OneBlade, which has an interesting single blade razor with a pivot. Which I really enjoy. It's too mild for many people, but I really like it. They also have an excellent shave cream and aftershave balm, which really surprises me, but it's really good. Um, gosh, Barrister and man, I'd have to go look in my den, which has a stack of things ye high to really. Oh, I just tried Katie's Bubbles X for the first time. That's one of his premium soaps. That's excellent. I just had a review of it. I posted a review of it on Sharpologist last week, I think.
Yeah, that was his
And
10
so, pardon me?
that was his 10-year anniversary
Right, correct.
scent. I've heard that one's pretty good.
It's very nice. It's I kind of it kind of gives me an earthy rose scent to it. I know that it's a lot more complex than that, but that's what I get out of it. So I kind of compare it to one of the artisans who has since left us, Dr. John's uh, uh, Violets in the Attic, I think it was called, which was sort of a dirty, was it? No, it was lavender, wasn't it? A dirty lavender kind of thing. It's along those same lines. So that's kind of nice too. But there's just so many. It is just so hard to keep up with everything the artisans are coming out, and the quality generally is so good. It's getting tougher and tougher to pick out uh, better over not quite as good. Years ago, it was you had glycerin soaps that were just okay, and then some of the high-end triple milled that were just fantastic. And now everything's beginning to concentrate on the ceiling. That there are so many good soaps. It's almost interesting when you don't find a good soap that it kind of makes you think, whoa, where did that come from?
Yeah, I see your point. It's there's definitely a ceiling building where I doubt if there's going to be any radical advancements in shaving anytime soon. That's true in both aspects of it. Like with a few rare exceptions, razors are not really advancing. Soap is has reached a point where it's not likely to get much better. Uh, Even like Gillette and Schick are reached a point where it's just like they're not innovating, because what else do you do at this point?
Well, they
Um,
tried innovating by adding more blades, and they learned that that's not quite what to do.
right. And then they tried, doing heated razors and
Yeah.
vibrating razors, and it's just like they're just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see if it's going to stick. It seems like we're starting to run up a greased hill a little bit. Um, to answer my own question, I've actually been going backwards. Like I've been using a lot of Taylor of Old Bond Street and Tabac and Saponificio Veracino and Leah and stuff that has been forgotten about by the very visible content creators. At least I know there's people using them, otherwise they wouldn't be there. But
Well, like in the
I
case of particularly in cases like Pontificio, like as we're talking, they had a hard time just even breaking into the U.S. They finally got a U.S. distributor last year, Mondial as well, and they're finally making these inroads simply because it's taken them this long to be able to import into the United States.
I didn't know that. That's interesting to know. Uh, but the reason I've been kind of gravitating back towards those is for a couple of reasons. One is um, there's like so many artisans like discontinuing scents that I like, or like entire artisans just going out of business entirely, that I've gotten to where I just want to latch on to anything that has brand stability. And so that kind of reverts me back to the legacy products. But also it kind of seems like they're really overplaying their hand, artisans, to the point where nothing that comes out is really that impressive. And so I'm kind of relaxing back into what I've always known, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and another complication to that is an individual puck of shave soap, for example, may last you 6 months if that's all you use, but it could last years if you rotate it amongst other products. So there's also a point of diminishing returns where somebody's cranking out a soap, but the people that like it may not repurchase it for months or even years. So that's a complicating factor for the artisan. I think artisans like the two I can think of right off the top of my head are Barrister and Mann and PAA. They routinely have seasonal scents. They bring back a scent for a short time, so it's not getting caught in the back room in the stock piling up. But they rotate them through. So if you like a scent, the odds are it's coming back in a year or so. And I think that's probably a good play for artisans like that, for the reasons you mentioned. You know, it's like you love a shave soap for its scent for some period of time, and then by the time you're finished with it, so much time has passed that the artisan may have moved on.
Right. I think a lot of other artisans ought to implement that more on a broader scale, I guess, because I feel like a lot of artisans have just too many scents and they can't all be there at once.
Yeah.
And so the correct answer is to do them seasonally and just kind of have them come in and out. And by the time they come around again, there's enough pent up energy that people are willing to pick them up.
Right.
Let's do this. Let's start bringing this video to a close. I ask everybody the same question. If you could give somebody advice based on what you've learned, you know, new shavers or even seasoned shavers, what have you learned since you've been doing this that you can pass on to other people that you think might be valuable information?
Okay. Well, enjoy the process. Don't chase after baby's butt smooth shaves if you can help it. Use technology to your benefit when it makes sense. For example, I personally, I think one of the best ideas of the new razor technology is the pivot. And a lot of people in the traditional shaving realm, the shave nerds, I call them, kind of poo-poo the whole idea. They said, just give me a DE and I'll do everything manually, which is fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with that either. But I think one of the few technologies that make a shave more pleasant and consistent is the pivot. So again, razors like OneBlade, High Proof, I think Focus Dynamic has one, the new version of the Broman, I think are worth looking at for razors, particularly for the newcomer. I think if I were to offer some additional suggestions, would be, take your time, enjoy the process. Don't automatically assume that you need the most aggressive razor or blade in the world. There are plenty of blade assortments, and you could find one that matches your face and how you shave quite easily. And don't be stuck with going down to your local grocery store and buying a Persona blade just because you think they're all made the same, because they're not. They all may look the same, but they are not all the same, believe me.
No, they are not all the
Um,
same.
and I encourage, particularly the new person, to kind of think about history and legacy and family. So many people come to me or talk with me and mention that, hey, I remember when I was a kid sitting at my grandfather's foot when he was in the bathroom shaving just like this, and now I'm doing it. There's really a lot of that around. There's a lot of that concept still going on and still valuable, and it kind of makes shaving a more memorable activity, a more family-based or uh, even a kind of a throwback to a simpler time kind of thing that makes it more enjoyable. And then also, you're not limited, as we were just talking, to a single scent. Your shave cream doesn't have to smell like your deodorant. There are a gazillion different shave scents around, and part of the fun is discovering what you want, discovering what you like.
Yeah, I like that. Just discovering what you like. Definitely, this is a journey of discovery when we're in this kind of hobbyist community that we're a part of. I'm going to touch on the OneBlade real quick. You've mentioned it a couple times, so we may as well talk about it real quick before we get out of here. I've seen it. I've seen people use it. Um, I guess I would need to know how good is it, because the thing that's keeping me from getting it is the fact that it uses a proprietary blade versus if it used like a half DE or even a gem PTFE blade. I think I might bite more easily. Uh, so
Yeah,
what is the claim to fame for that razor? Because I know there
uh,
are some people who swear by it.
right. And that's kind of the thing here, where it seems like there's a love it or hate it attitude. Um, and admittedly, it's not for everybody. It's quite mild. The Genesis razor, which is their high-end razor, is the least mild, and unfortunately also the one I like the most. It's just like whenever I shave with it, I get a very close, comfortable shave that's also very consistent. I don't get the little patches of roughness that I can get with just shaving with a DE uh, or another, stable safety razor. Um, it is true. They are stuck on the Feather FHS. You can play around with it some and use a D-spine gem PTFE blade. It will work with a little bit of tweaking, but yeah, that is one of the concerns that many people have, that there is basically little to no blade choice, which is an issue for a lot of people.
To your point, you mentioned it's got a pivoting head. Anybody who's seen it once knows that. Um, does is that something that in your opinion that we are rejecting maybe with too much haste? Because like anybody who's familiar with shaving with cartridge razors, which is most of us, knows that it's easier to shave that way. Like part of the reason you have these hair patches all over is because when you have no pivoting head, when your hand is the pivot, you're gonna miss stuff. Like that's just how it is.
Yeah, and I think part of it is an attitude issue amongst the enthusiasts, uh, that they want to do things completely manually. They want to have full control over the shave, and this is kind of losing control, which personally I do not agree with. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that the pivot is a useful technology in a razor, but it also prevents some types of razor technologies too. Like, for example, you can't use a regular double-edged razor blade in any kind of pivoting razor. The best you can do is the Broman and the High Proof and the Focus. They take a blade that's been snapped in half, which in one respect is fine, but in another respect is a little more difficult to use because of the blade edge becomes a little less stable and a little more prone to a not necessarily a nick or cut, but an
Blade chatter?
irritation issue.
Is blade chatter a thing?
On a couple of them, blade chatter is a thing, yeah. But how much is kind of dependent on the individual design and what the shaver puts up with. As far as I'm concerned, for me personally, blade chatter has never been a huge issue for me.
Interesting. Well, I don't know. I might have to check it out, because if you swear by it, then there must be something to it. I know that Chris Bailey early on in his shaving videos thought it was amazing. It definitely got a lot of positive attention early on, so maybe it's something I need to revisit. I'm not opposed to it. Well, sir,
you can start with like the OneBlade core at US, I believe it's $40 now, 30 some dollars, which isn't, a deal breaker to at least try the technology. It may be not quite what you're looking for as far as elegance or passing down from generation to generation, but it's at least give the technology a try. And then if you like it, go up to the hybrid or the Genesis.
right. Yeah, I'll definitely have to poke around and see what the prices are. Maybe I'll get a used one somewhere, because they do pop up once in a while on the used market.
They do, yes. They are definitely available used, yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come on the show. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. It's been a privilege having you on. I know you're busy, and you are definitely I think you've influenced a lot more people to get into wet shaving than most. Let's put it that way. You've definitely had a hand in I think more people than you realize.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate it very much.
Well, everybody, I will go ahead and put Mantic59's YouTube channel in the description of the video, as well as in the card at the front, and I'll put his website in the description. I'm going to put everything for this guy in the description. I want to thank everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Soap Thing telling you, shave like you mean it. Thanks for watching.